All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Politics. We love politics. Anyway, welcome to Talk Back. And we have a candidate forum that we are preparing for right now. John King is over there. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Pete.
There you go.
I got to stretch my neck over here.
I know. I can't see that.
Develop some more vertebrae in order
over the
to
screen. Well, see,
reach over here.
Brad's tall. He doesn't have to get on it.
Yeah, he's also standing like 6 feet away from me, so it makes it tough. Well, today is Forum Day for Talkback, and first off, let's just create a little bit of understanding of where we're talking about. So we're talking about a House race, Montana legislature, right? There's a federal House and a state House for Civics 101. But even narrower down, right? We're one House district. So why don't one of you tell us kind of where we are, what House district you're running for?
Go ahead, Nick. You're the challenger. Go ahead.
Sure. It is House District 97, which okay. District 97 covers all of Lolo. It goes west along Highway 12 out to the Idaho border. Kind of snakes up and clips off a chunk of western Missoula, south of Mullen Road and west of Reserve, and then kind of follows the Clark Fork out to Petty Creek, although it does not include Frenchtown or Alberton.
Okay. So if you live in that area, we would especially like to get calls from you. And for anybody who wants to call, and we're kind of no limits usually on Talkback, there is one rule on forum days. That is, if you call and ask a question, it needs to be a question that both candidates can answer. So I guess without further ado,
first of all, say the lines are open at 721-1290. So.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Yeah. So I'll start with one of the questions. One of the big issues, I've looked at both of your websites or Facebook pages about things that are interesting to you. So one of the things I noticed was public land access and natural resource jobs. So why don't you just bandy about those two topics? Are they in conflict, do you think, in Montana? And what is a path forward?
So you want to start with Brad. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to say good morning to Western Montana. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be on Talkback with two icons from Missoula, John and Peter, who are probably better known than the X's up on North Higgins because people know what you guys stand for. Most people are still uncertain about what's going on with those three caricatures, but
it just says this is where the farmers market is.
Okay, all right, good. That's
from
good.
Up high.
Yeah, but vertically, what does it tell you? At any rate, I guess first of all, in the last race in 2014, there was much ado about nothing regarding public lands because I think the big stance was keeping public lands open, and there's never been a movement to sell public lands. Nobody is talking about it. There's been some discussion to transfer public lands from the feds to the state, but I think what really makes sense is to have the state involved in the management
of
federal public lands.
Quick question: Where did that whole hue and cry come from? That said, they're going to sell the lands to the highest bidder. I said, well, because both sides have made that claim, and I'm going. Who's buying up the public lands? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
It was my understanding, at least what I derived from the last campaign, was that the Democrats had not done a great deal in the state house, and there wasn't much to talk about. They hadn't done anything tax relief wise, and I'm just being very honest based upon what I saw. They hadn't created new jobs. They hadn't reduced property taxes. There was not much stimulation in the state, so when you didn't have a lot to talk about, what they talked about was public lands. And there was this movement, at least created movement, that the Republicans were going to sell public lands. And there were pieces that were sent out that were just blatant lies about, they were going to go out and sell it. There's no way that you can sell public lands unless there's a concerted effort by a majority of people, and even then, Montanans aren't going to allow that. And nobody I've ever talked with in the state legislature has even moved to sell public land. So to segue over to resource development, I don't think the two are in conflict. I think you can develop natural resources if you want to develop natural resources on public lands. I have a friend that works in the oil industry, and with the technology they have right now, they can use a 6-acre parcel on a 2-section or 100 or 1,200 acre parcel to be able to extract oil from that, and you can hide it in the corner where you won't see it. So, in many respects, it's probably less visible than some of the windmills that are out there creating energy. So I don't see it in conflict. I think that the the whole public lands sale is a false narrative that isn't going to gain any traction. So.
Okay, so Nick Davis, go ahead. First of all, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, because we've never met you?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Nick Davis.
You got to back off the mic a little bit. There you go. I'm sorry.
hot.
Yeah, that's a very
All
hot mic. So go ahead.
Okay.
So yeah, perfect.
I will lean.
That's good.
Lean back. I can't lean in.
Lean to the left if you want.
No, I'll just stay right here in the center. How's that?
Just don't lean too forward, okay? Because then you'll hit the mic again.
Right. I'll just stay right here in the center.
That's fine. That's good.
So to answer the second question first, no, I don't think there is a conflict between generating resources from public lands and the protection and preservation of those lands, and those are issues that we can certainly talk about down the road. In terms of the threat of public land sale, which Mr. Tschida seems to think is kind of a straw argument, I would argue on the other side, and although the effort to transfer public lands to state control, they're careful to avoid the word "sell" these lands. The issue is, and make no mistake, this is an issue that is very much alive and well. It was in the National Republican platform. There is an agenda item that to expedite the transfer of federal public lands to state control. The Montana Republican Party in the last session, in their platform, also had a item in there to consider the transfer of federal public lands to state control.
Just to clarify, so when we're talking about public lands, are we making a distinction between state public lands and federal public lands?
Correct. So this would be federal public lands, and what these groups are targeting are, they're not going to touch Glacier and Yellowstone, the national parks, and they're not going to go after the wilderness areas, so the Bob and the Scapegoat and things of that nature. Those are off limits. But what they are talking about is all national forest land and all BLM land. So we're looking at over 25% of the land mass in Montana would be targeted in this effort. And while I think it's easy to say, and these groups that advocate this transfer are careful to say that they don't want to sell the lands, that they're all about preserving public access to these lands. But what no one has explained to me, or what I have not been able to find out to any satisfaction, is what does the landscape look like after this transfer from federal public lands to state control? Because our concern, and when I say ours, I mean people who are very concerned about keeping our public lands here in Montana and improving access to those lands. What our concern is that the state does have land. So on statehood, Montana was granted about 6% of the land mass.
Hang on to that thought. Yes. We're up against a commercial break, and we have a caller. We haven't had a chance to answer that phone yet. So we have three other lines open. Nick Davis, Brad Tschida, both with us here in studio. Brad, you're the incumbent, is that correct?
That's correct.
He represents House District 97, and Nick is the Democratic challenger. We're going to come right back, get Tyler on the line, and we have, again, three other lines open, 721-1290.
Good news for machine and large diesel owners. Western States Cat has up to 35% off grease, oil, and more. Plus, we have certified technicians who can do a technical analysis for $50, a flat rate fluid change, just about any size weld job, or a total engine rebuild. Stated simply, we can make just about any machine as good as new. Western States Cat, built for Montana.
Okay, here we are. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Candidate forum going on. Kind of an informal affair. In studio, we have from House District 97, the incumbent Brad Tschida and the challenger Nick Davis. And we want to get to the phones right away because we try to pull our callers first. Tyler, good morning. You're on Talkback. Do you have a question for both of our candidates, sir?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Most people in Montana just cannot stand traffic. I live in Lolo, and I know every time there's an accident between Lolo and Missoula, it shuts down the freeway for hours. You can't get from anywhere south of, Lolo into Missoula without going that one direction. I would like to get both you guys' opinion on putting in a bypass bridge over from Lolo to South Hills.
Okay, so we'll ask our candidates that question. So, Nick, we'll go with you first. Right. What do you think?
Yeah, now
That's
I can
good.
tell.
That's good.
Yeah, when I get my
right.
voice in my
Okay.
So yeah, I can I can certainly empathize with Tyler. Certainly over the past few years, it's been the increase in traffic everywhere has been notable, and I know for the people in Lolo, having the one corridor into Missoula
At least it's a
tough
4-lane.
one. Yeah, but even then, it's and Reserve Street is a 4-lane, but good Lord, you can. You can barely pick a time to go north on Reserve and not plan on spending, 20 minutes, 30 minutes getting up there. So.
And when you get into those greener pastures, Tyler, the South Hills, you're going to have to go through that Linda Vista roundabout, just so you know.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, and that's kind of the issue, right? Because I think this is a similar issue to the proposed renovation of the Maclay Bridge as well. Providing some kind of an outlet, although I think what Tyler's talking about is something that would go directly from Lolo, so you could bypass 93 altogether. I think the issues is that there are, roads in these residential neighborhoods that are not designed to take through traffic. So in the case of a Lolo bridge, I don't think it's just a matter of simply putting up the bridge and calling it good. I mean, you would have to go through, obviously plan the route all the way through the South Hills and Lower Miller Creek and all that. I do think it's an issue that needs to be looked at and tried to figure out. I do quite a bit of driving in town as well, and although our traffic here in Missoula Lolo is not nearly as bad as some places, I do know that it's gotten to the point where it definitely is a detraction to the quality of life. So.
Okay. Brad, what do you think?
Peter, I think, was it Tyler that called in?
Yes, it was
Tyler.
Tyler.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Building a bridge is not going to solve the problem entirely, because you've got an entire stretch of road from that Lolo area. First of all, you're going to have to identify a place to cross the river and determine how much traffic it can bear. And then you've got to come in Lower Miller Creek, and you don't have an established road that's going to handle all the traffic in that area. So it's going to be a long-term response to that issue. One of the things that I've been working on right now, and I don't know that we're going to consider any legislation for it right now, but it's in the planning stage, is to reduce the speed limit from the Buckhouse Bridge all the way to Lolo to 55 miles per hour. Because right now with a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit, people are going 75 or 80 miles an hour. And that's what's causing a lot of the crashes. People are, there's a lot more traffic, so people are a lot more tense and lower on patience when they come in the morning or go home in the evening. So if we can reduce the speed in that area, it probably only slows down traffic by a minute between the Buckhouse Bridge and Lolo. So I think one of the initial things that we can do to resolve that issue now is to reduce the speed and really educate folks on being more courteous when they're on the road driving. A bridge across the Bitterroot is a possibility, but I think it's so far down the road right now that we have to look at an intermediate solution. And I think one of those that will work will be to reduce the speed on 93 coming into town and going out.
And you've got a bird's eye look on that one, don't you? Because your business is right off of 93. Correct?
Actually, thanks for the plug. That's Tschida Flooring is my mom and my brother. So, hey, Mom, Mark, this won't cost you anything. I actually live out on the west end, out by where Elmar Estates is. So that's on the western fringe of where the district is. Yeah. So, growing up there, we saw that. I mean, it was a 2-lane road. It was tough, getting on and off, and it's much more congested, so much more difficult now.
By the way, I might be going your mom and your
I don't know who to charge for that free ad. So I wanted to ask a pretty broad question. Either of you can take this one pretty easily. Are there any bills that you plan to bring to the legislature if you're elected this year? I mean, it's only January that the legislative session will meet. It's the opportunity to bring new ideas. And even though neither of you are elected, you're almost on the same footing as most of the new House members anyway. So are there any things that you hope to bring forward at the legislative session?
Brad, you start.
As I mentioned, thank you, John. As I mentioned, the reduction of traffic speed on 93 would be one, but I think one of the major issues we're dealing with now, at least that was important to me and important to a lot of folks was the idea of suicide prevention in Montana. That's a growing concern, and in some areas it's epidemic, especially on the reservation. So we're trying to find some ways that we can get rid of some of the confusion that's ongoing now in that arena, because I think a lot of people are being pulled when they take a look at issues of physician-assisted death and the suicide increase. You're seeing it among young folks in Oregon right now. There's a significant increase in the number of suicides, and I think young people especially, but people of all ages are confused about, should I do something or shouldn't I do something? What's the impact of that?
Okay, let's get Nick for a minute or so, and then we're going to take a break, and then we'll get Marilyn on. Go ahead. What do you have in mind when you get there?
So one of the bills that I would like to bring to the floor would be, here in Western Montana, we're in sort of this transition economy where we're sort of moving away from the natural resource extraction economy. We're in this sort of service-based economy, not a lot of good-paying jobs, not a lot of good-paying benefits. I would like to see the legislature work to develop new industries that can provide high-paying jobs and keep our talented kids from leaving the state to get good work. And I have a background in TV production and film production. Have worked on a project over the past few years with the state tourism department, creating short films about the outdoor lifestyle in the state. We developed a YouTube channel to showcase these films. The channel gives a tourism benefit back to the state. But the coolest thing about this program is that I've worked with dozens of filmmakers all across the state on these short films with these micro grants that we get. And I am absolutely amazed by the level of talent that we have right here in this industry. And I believe that we can make Montana a powerhouse, a global powerhouse in outdoor filmmaking. We have the landscapes. We have the talent right here. I am working with the gentleman that I developed this entire program with, the former commissioner of the film office, on a blueprint to incentivize that industry and to grow it from the ground up right here.
Okay, we're going to take a break and come. Marilyn, we'll get your call on here in just a moment. We'll be right back with our candidate forum. Hey, we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Our candidates in studio, Brad Tschida, Nick Davis, running for House District 97. So let's get Marilyn on the line. We're running short of time, Marilyn. What is your question, ma'am?
Well, I've always been very concerned about the economy here in Montana, 49th in the state, and I think the fact that we're getting away from a resource economy, I don't think we should do that. The reliance on the feds, I guess, is what bothers me the most, that over 50% of the money that Montana lives on is from the federal government, and so then we lose our state sovereignty. So I guess my question is, what can we do to get rid of that carrot and stick that the feds have over us, because we take so much money from them, we rely on it. It's not right. We need to be doing our resources. Those resources in the ground are used for many, many things to make America prosperous.
Okay, we will ask them that question. So real quickly, Nick, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So, Marilyn, I would say, first of all, I don't have the personal view that the federal government is necessarily evil. I totally understand that we want to be independent and sovereign as a state. And like I was mentioning before the break, I do think that we have a responsibility to develop new industries here. And I think we can do that using new technologies and things of that nature. We can develop very Montana-centric industries here to raise income and provide better paying jobs. With that said, I also don't think that, that resource extraction economy will go away, nor do I think it should. I just think that we need to take a realistic view forward and understand that it is not likely that resource extraction will be a dominant player in our economic landscape going into the future.
Okay, and with that, I wish, Brad, I'm going to give you plenty of time when we get back from the break to answer Marilyn's question. But we're up against a hard break, and so we have all four of our lines open. Our candidates will be with us till 10 o'clock this morning. Brad Tschida and Nick Davis both vying for a Montana House District 97. And we would appreciate your calls. And as John said at the outset, we just want to make sure that any question you ask can be answered by both of our candidates. So we'll be back after the top of the hour. Welcome back to Talk Back, brought to you in part this morning by Selway Armory on Stockyard Road. More guns and ammo than anyone in Missoula. The best prices in Montana, Montana's premier firearms dealer. Also brought to you by Diggett Excavating, bringing 30 years of excellence to every job, 214-4292. And by Ponderosa Dental, just off Reserve on 3rd. When you think of a great smile, think of Ponderosa Dental, proud corporate partner of Grizzly Athletics.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
And we are back with our candidate forum. That's John King over there. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us here in studio are Brad Tschida and Nick Davis, both vying for House District 97. Now, Marilyn asked a question, and we didn't give Brad a chance to respond. So she was kind of bemoaning the fact that we're seem to be deliberately moving away from a resource economy into a more service economy, and wanted to find out a way to keep that from happening. So, Brad, what's your answer to that? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The second part of that question was the federal government being involved in a significant portion of our state budget. They are. About 50% of our budget is fed, and we all know that the federal government never changes their mind on anything, never changes any program. So when you're held hostage by 50% of your income coming from one source, that's not a good thing. But to get to Marilyn's question about resource extraction, 80% of the energy in Montana comes from fossil fuels. And I think it's important that we develop the ability to get permits for companies much more readily. We've had mining companies that have been waiting 18 years to get a permit. So they've been held hostage and their money has been taken and they've not been given an answer. So there's things that we need to do to allow those companies to receive the ability to start on their projects.
Is that something that the state legislature has the authority to do, though?
I don't know if the legislature can get involved. There's the possibility that you can ask the Department of Environmental Quality to be a little bit more expedient in their determination. But as far as writing more laws, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is creating a climate of customer service and wellness so that people are getting an answer to questions in a timely fashion. And as far as other energy resources go, I think we can develop wind, we can develop hydro, we can develop solar, but they shouldn't have an unfair advantage over the other existing and effective sources of energy. And I was going to make mention one of the comments that Nick made about developing new jobs in Montana, high-paying jobs. It almost sounded like an endorsement of what Greg Gianforte is saying about bringing in coding jobs and entrepreneurial jobs in Montana. That's one of the things that we can do. You see the growth in Gallatin Valley in wages, where 40% of the growth in 2014 in wages in Montana came from that area. $90,000 a year jobs coming out of right now technology that's now been sold off to Oracle, and they put in one of their world headquarter facilities in Bozeman. So they're adding jobs to the Bozeman economy. I think the same thing can be done here in Missoula.
Okay, let's get to the phones and say good morning to Leland. Hi, Leland. You're on with our candidates. What's your question?
Yeah, so I was just curious.
Leland, you'll have to turn your radio down, please.
Oh, whoops.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So I was just curious about what these guys' opinions are on the Initiative 177 to stop trapping on public lands, and what they had in mind, if they are not in support of it, what they have in mind to preserve our natural heritage rights and maintain our ability to manage these species.
Okay, all right. We'll ask our candidates. Brad, you go first. Go ahead.
Well, Leland, thanks for the question. I am not in favor of I-177 because, in my estimation, it goes against efforts that the state has put into place now or codified in law as far as the ability to harvest animals. It takes away one of the rights that has been inherent in Montana for years and years and years, and that is a right to trap. And there are people who trap and do a very effective job of that. There are folks who are saying they're animals, pets who have been caught. I don't know of anybody who has, at least not in my sphere of influence, that hikes that's had an animal that's been involved in, having been caught in a foot trap. And people who trap know what they're doing. They know where they're putting their snares. And a lot of times they're going after marten, mink, beaver, otters, muskrats, things of that nature. So they're very good about putting their traps where they're not going to cause any harm. I am a big believer in maintaining all of the rights that Montana Heritage has presented and preserved for folks, including trapping. So whether it's hunting, fishing, whether it's netting, whether it's putting out traps to snare or restrain animals, I'm a proponent. So I would oppose I-177.
Okay. So what about you, Nick?
So
Go ahead.
Yep, I would lead by saying that I understand the effort behind I-177. People do get dogs caught in traps. It has happened. I don't think it's super prevalent, but the nature of that kind of experience for a dog lover, I think, generates a lot of sympathy, because I have dogs, and I would be torn up if one of my dogs got caught in a leg trap out on a hike. With that said, I also would say that I am not for I-177, and the reason for that is because I do believe that trapping is a heritage here in Montana. We do, in the Constitution, the right to harvest animals is in our Constitution. It doesn't technically specify trapping, but that's been the assumption, that trapping goes along with hunting and fishing, and that is something I am loath to change by referendum. The other thing is that I think it takes some control out of the people who, at FWP, our wildlife biologists, that use trapping as a tool to manage wildlife in following sort of scientific principles. So I don't know that this is an issue that's going to go away. I don't think right now that the referendum is the way to go, because it is such a hot button emotional issue.
Okay, we're going to come right back. Catherine's on the line. We have 3 lines open, by the way, if you want to talk with our candidates for House District 97. These are state issues. Remember, they can't necessarily solve what's happening in Iran, but they can help with state issues. So if you have a question or a comment, please make sure that the question can be asked of both candidates, Nick Davis and Brad Tschida. We'll be right back and get Catherine's call, and hopefully yours as well. 721-1290. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. You can also make your comments on our Facebook page, which many have done. So, John, what do you got?
All right. With my eagle eyes, I'm reading from 7 feet away here. Chad on Facebook says, what, if anything, can or will you do in response to the city of Missoula's effort to regulate the private transfer of firearms within city limits, which most likely is in violation of state law? So I guess we start with Nick this time.
We'll start with Nick. Yeah, go ahead.
Get all the easy ones, right? So I guess the first answer would be, as a state legislature, I don't know how much influence we would have over municipal ordinances, because that's not how the how our government is set up. The question, I think, is pointing to an overall a bigger question about Second Amendment rights, and I would say that from a municipality standpoint, they have the ability to pass ordinances, and that is something that can't be infringed, even if it's an issue that you don't agree with. I haven't looked at the details of the proposed ordinance. I can tell you that I am, I'm a hunter and a gun owner, and I absolutely would not advocate, personally, back any sort of legislation that would remove those rights. But in terms of the municipality, I think it's kind of up to the people of Missoula.
Okay, Brad, what do you think?
Well, I have read the legislation, and it is clearly in violation of the state constitution. I think it's kind of a feel-good effort to appease people locally. There's no way that we can restrain the exchange of firearms in Missoula in violation of the state constitution. And I think what they're attempting to do is a nice gesture, but I don't think it carries a whole lot of viability, because exchanges are going to go on irrespective of an ordinance like that. Even if it were to pass and be found constitutional, all you have to do is leave the city limits and you can conduct business. So really, it's much ado about nothing in my mind.
Okay, so go ahead, John.
Just a follow-up question, because you both seem to have a disagreement fundamentally on the power of the state constitution and the role of the state legislature versus the local municipality. Can you flesh that out between yourselves real quick?
Go ahead. Yeah, Brad.
My understanding is that state law is going to supersede in some areas local municipal law, and unless there's a change in the state constitution, if the Montana Code is changed, which the legislature can do, then the city of Missoula might be allowed to do something like that. But until there was a passage of an ordinance, passage of a change to the constitution, an ordinance like that would not be legal or viable in Missoula. So, and I would not be a proponent of changing the state constitution for something that's specific to Missoula or specific to one area, because it makes no sense for the rest of the state and really doesn't make sense for Missoula.
Okay, Nick?
Mm-hmm. So I guess at some level this is a issue of interpretation, because in terms of the state law versus municipal code, I do believe that the municipalities have the ability to pass laws that, while might not be that some people could be interpreted as challenging a state law, municipalities still have the freedom to pass laws that sort of adjust or further legislate issues like this, and still not be in violation of the state law. And honestly, I would need to get more into the weeds on the details of this thing. But if it's a matter of passing background checks in a does the state law, Brad, does it say that background checks are illegal in the state?
No, it does not.
So if it was a matter of background checks, then I wouldn't see where an ordinance that would establish that would be in violation of the state law.
Okay, let's get back to the phones. Catherine, thanks for holding. You're on with our candidates. Go ahead.
Okay. To the water compact, which is still, ongoing, the status of it and whether each of you support or oppose the SKC and the Blackfoot water compacts.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate that. So, Nick, you first about the water compacts. It was 2 years ago. It was a big deal in the legislature. So
yes, it was, and
it was passed. So.
It was, yep, indeed. And I am a supporter of the water compact. I believe that we, over the course of the past couple hundred years, have made a number of promises in writing, signed to Native American tribes, and have consistently violated those promises time and time again. This is a issue that obviously goes far beyond something like the water compact, but if you look at the compacts with the CSKT, it is this is their land, and I believe that they have the right to manage those lands, and I believe that they proved that they have the ability to do it, and it's the right thing to do.
All right. So what do you think, Nick? I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Well, first of all, there was a clause in the water compact that was proven by the courts to be unconstitutional, and those who wrote the compact said that there will be no amending of the compact. So, in essence, the compact is unconstitutional. As far as the...
Are you talking about the state constitution or the U.S.
I'm talking about the state constitution,
okay.
Article 2,
right.
Section 18, that says a state cannot be held harmless if they do injury to a citizen, and the compact said, the state will be held harmless. So that was found recently to be unconstitutional by one of the courts. So as far as the compact goes, I am definitely opposed to it. I've talked to farmers and ranchers in the area. Their water rights are being taken from them, and they're being told, or the public's being told, oh no, their water rights will be intact. And if you talk to folks who irrigate up there, 90% of the landowners are deeded landowners in the valley, in the Mission Valley, in the Flathead Valley, and in the Polson area. And they are non-tribal members who own that land, and their water is being taken away from them. And the tribes, when the reservation was settled, they ceded, C-E-D-E-D, they ceded land, the lands that they were on, in exchange for a reservation. Now, they found all kinds of rights apparently in the Constitution to give them the ability to control water flow to fish in certain areas. Well, if their fishing ground was Lolo Creek, There's no water in that right now. So how do you force water to be in Lolo Creek when there's no water there? So I think they've gone well out of their pay grade to try to come up with something that essentially gives power to the federal government, because the federal government oversees the tribes.
Okay, we're up against a break. Go ahead, John. We'll take a break. We have more Facebook. We also have Harry and Larry. And we're waiting for Terry. So,
by the way, Barry, we've been waiting for your call for 8 years. So it's about time.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll be right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. And both of our candidates can boogie, by the way. Just want you to know. 721-1290 is our number. We'll get to Harry and to Larry on the phone in a moment. Right now we have Facebook.
Yeah, the final element of this forum is a dance-off, so be prepared. Well, I hope you brought your slick shoes. We have a question from Elena. She wants to know where you stand on refugee resettlement in Montana.
Okay, we'll start with you, Brad. Go ahead.
Until we find a way to adequately vet refugees from countries that are known to include heavy terrorist activities, I'm opposed to it. The federal government has said that we don't have the intelligence on the ground to be able to identify individuals who may want to harm us. We have ISIS who's saying, yes, we're going to infiltrate the states. I think we are creating our own Trojan horse when we bring people in that we haven't been able to thoroughly identify as to whether or not they potentially pose harm to ourselves. And until we can find a way to do that, we have to withhold. And that's a temporary matter. And whether temporary is a year, 2 years, 5 years, we need to find a way to adequately assess the character and qualities and threat posed by those individuals.
Okay, Nick, what about you?
Okay. I am in favor of refugee resettlement as long as the vetting process is...
There you go. Perfect.
Is in place. I do think that there's been a little bit of a exaggeration of the lack of vetting here. I think that stems from a statement from former FBI Director Comey, who at some point said that there was no guarantee that no terrorist would ever get through this vetting process. And I absolutely understand the fear behind bringing in folks from some of this country, but the fact of the matter is that life is a series of risk-reward propositions. Crossing the street, getting in the car, you're more likely to die from a TV falling on you than to die from an incidence of terrorism in this country. I think we have to make sure that those vetting processes are in place. They are. It takes 2 years and multiple agencies to vet. I believe that immigrants make our community better. I believe that about the Hmong folks that have settled here, the Russian folks that have settled here, and I think it is the very founding principle of our country. We are a nation built on immigrants that were fleeing persecution, and I think we cannot turn our back on that.
Okay, let's get to the phone. Harry, thanks for holding. You're on Talkback. Go ahead. What's your question?
I got a real quick question, and I want a follow-up question to it afterwards, if you please.
Okay.
I know it's not a state matter, but how do you feel about the mandatory health insurance?
Are you talking about the Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, okay. The mandated health insurance.
Well,
how do they feel about that? I just want to know how they feel about it.
Okay, well.
And then I want to follow up on that.
Okay, Nick, go ahead real quick.
I guess you could weasel this into a legislative possibility, right? Because the state expanded Medicare last year.
So Nick, you first. Go ahead.
Sure. So I recognize that there are issues with the ACA, and certainly the problem of getting sort of younger, healthier folks signed up for the program to offset the folks that are in more medical need. I can tell you that personally, the ACA has been a benefit to me and my family. One of my family members was denied. I had left a job that I had had for quite some time. The company moved. I stayed, and when I tried to get insurance for my family, one of my family members was denied because of a very essentially a pre-existing condition. Although we had very strong reason to believe that was an illegitimate claim, and I literally could not get health insurance for this family member of mine for 2 years. And I can tell you that living under the fear of something happening and not having a loved one be able to see a doctor because we could not afford it without health insurance is terrifying.
Okay, so Brad, what do you think? Are you in favor or not of the Affordable Care Act?
I am gravely opposed to it for a variety of reasons, one of which If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. The second one, if you like your insurance company, you can keep your insurance company. The third was premiums will be reduced. The fourth was deductibles will be maintained at lower levels. My wife's family has a business here in town that employs about 35 people. I won't plug the business.
Oh, yeah.
But their insurance rates have gone up in the last 3 years 66%. And if you take a look at the increases last year alone by three of the major carriers, they went up, I believe it was 18, 22, and 60+%. So I'm opposed to it because you've got able-bodied, healthy people who are enrolling, but you have far too few of those who are on the system now to cover the cost of the individuals who need more health care. And even those who are getting on, they're getting subsidized payments. So it winds up being a transfer of wealth from people who have a little bit of extra discretionary income to those who don't. And the residents I've talked to in House District 97 are getting killed by taxes and invisible fees. And I think it's absolutely appalling what they're doing.
Okay, so Harry, what's your follow-up?
Okay, I was just going to say, I know that's a federal thing, but there is a state-mandated insurance that you could do something about it if you don't like it. I would wonder if they would be willing to do away with the mandatory auto insurance, which is taxing a lot of people. That's a lot of money coming out, and most people don't use it because when they do use it, their rates go sky high. So that's something a state legislature can do, and I have never heard anybody say they would attack that.
Okay, thanks for the call. So, Brad, we'll start with you on that one. What do you think?
I think by law we're required to have it because of the liability with damage that we could do to somebody else. Health insurance I think should be an individual choice. If somebody wants to carry it, they should be allowed to do that. If they don't want to carry health insurance, that's their choice. I empathize with Nick. It's hard if you need it and can't find it, but those are fewer cases than those who are taking advantage of it, getting a quote unquote free government subsidized insurance premium, and it winds up being borne on the backs of other individuals. So as far as auto insurance goes, there's really nothing you can do. It's required by law. I don't know that I would do away with it because if you injure somebody, if you're driving a car and you're uninsured, and I've been hit by an uninsured motorist, then it winds up being on my back anyway. So I think it needs to be something that is maintained in law.
Okay, Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with Brad 100% on the auto insurance for the exact reasons that he stated. In terms of the difference between auto insurance and mandatory health insurance, this is where I disagree because you mentioned that people can choose not to get health insurance. I didn't choose to not get health insurance for my family member. I tried like heck to get health insurance, and it simply was not there. It was not there, and that is a result of insurance companies and manipulating the market to exclude people, and oftentimes that need it the most, and that is something that I cannot stand for.
So more competition across state lines with more insurers would probably help out because if you had more options, you might be able to.
Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. So we have to take a break, and we're going to come back. Larry, if you'll hang on just a minute, we have 3 lines open for our candidates, and time is rapidly running. Have like 27 minutes left for you to get your questions in. House District 97 been a great candidate forum so far, especially because of your questions. 721-1290. Nick Davis, Brad Tschida, both here in studio. We're waiting for your calls. Are you on your feet constantly for work and achy, burning legs or varicose veins are affecting you? Call Missoula Surgical Associates at 542-7525 for your free screening September 24th. Teachers, hospitality workers, factory workers, moms. Can you afford to put off achy legs any longer? Missoula Surgical offers quick in-office treatments with no downtime, and insurance covers treatment costs. For your free screening September 24th, call 542-7525. Boom. All right, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. And joining us in studio are candidates for Montana House District 97, Nick Davis, Brad Tschida, and we have another Facebook question, John.
Paul wants to know, this should be a yes or no answer, given Montana law, do both of you live in your district?
Okay, so Brad, we'll start with you.
I used to. They redistricted my house. I'm about 600 yards outside the district, away from the center of the Clark Fork River. So, no, I live actually in House District 96, but the state law says if you live if the district you're running for is entirely in the county, then you can run for it.
Okay, so
No, and mine either. I live just to the east of the western boundary of the district. Or
So
the
there you
eastern
go.
boundary of the district. So
wow, so neither of you live in.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to the phone. And Larry, first of all, thank you for holding, sir. You're on with our candidates.
Yes. I'm not sure whether this is in your district, but it's adjacent to your district, and I'm concerned about the closed Smurfit Stone plant. I think last I heard on the news, their delinquent taxes were approaching close to $1 million, and a lot of that is state tax money that's delinquent. Do either of you have any ideas on what the legislature might be able to do to get back some or all of those delinquent taxes? I know it's a big impact on the Frenchtown School District where many of your constituents live. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, thanks for the call, Larry. Appreciate that. We'll start with you, Nick. What do you think?
Right. Yes, the Smurfit Stone closing is sort of a pattern that's unfortunately way too frequent these days. But it's also a pattern that's disturbing in the sense that this is another large company that came in and did their thing and left without taking care of the land that they had used during their time as a viable company. This is another instance where I do believe that the federal government can be a partner to the state. As you guys might have read, up in Columbia Falls, the former the site of the aluminum plant up there.
They want to make it a Superfund site.
So there it looks like it's going to be classified as a Superfund site, which I'm very pleased with, because that means the feds will come in and they will deal with the former owners there, and they will make sure the remediation happens and that we can use that land, that we're not imperiling the health of the people in that community, and we can restore it to the place where we can develop new industries in that spot.
Okay. Brad, go ahead.
In terms of Smurfit Stone specifically, I have been in conversation with folks regarding that matter, and there is a movement afoot to attempt to have the state legislature involve themselves in rectifying the delinquent taxes. So there are efforts being made. I have communicated with some individuals who are taking some steps to put together some potential legislation. I don't know that I'll be directly involved in it, but I will certainly have a hand in it because of its proximity to the district in which we operate. And I think one of the reasons that Smurfit Stone closed up that operation was because tax and regulatory environment in Montana was preventing them from being profitable, and they looked at where they could put their resources to a better use, and so they closed that plant down and redirected those resources out of state, which is unfortunate.
All right, so go ahead, John. Oh, we need we're almost. We got 2 minutes before break. Dick, you are on Talkback with our guests. Hi.
Hi.
What is your question that can be asked of both candidates, please?
Okay, earlier on there was discussion about transferring federal lands to state control, whether it be through purchase or transfer. I guess my question is to both of you, would it be easier if the state had control of our public lands, the BLM and the forest, to take advantage of some economic opportunities such as logging and drilling under development of natural resources, and then subsequently the state benefiting from those monies? Would it, and going along with that, environmentally, it seems like the federal environmental laws really prohibit a lot of things under federal control. I was just curious as to your opinion.
Okay, we're going to come right back and have our candidates. So we'll start with Brad and then go to Nick with that question from Dick. We'll be right back after this. By the way, all four of our lines are open. If you have a question for our candidates, give us a call right now. It's 721-1290. Oh, yeah. 721-1290 is the number. 1-800-568-5309. Now we had to take a break right after Dick asked his question. So, Brad, you first about federal versus state lands.
I'm going to have to come in here more often because if you guys do Doobie Brothers music all the time, this is like high school and college flashbacks here. So,
well, that's because I'm old.
Yeah.
And I get to pick the music.
You and me both, Peter. I know we got young guys in here and then two old dukes. So
there you go.
State management of federal lands, I think it makes sense on a variety of different levels. People talk about the state taking an economic hit if there's a fire and not being able to fund it. Well, it seems to me if you had a collaborative management of lands that are controlled by the feds but managed by the state, you could determine whether it's a good fit to allow any of those federal lands to become efficiently or effectively controlled by the state. I don't know if that's a good way to do it, but it seems to me there are ways that we can go ahead and attempt to do
that. I'm sorry, that model already exists within firefighting.
Right.
When federal lands and then they have various mandates of who does what where and who asks for what. So that's already extant.
Right. So, I think that works very plausibly. The second thing is that for every dollar the state invests in management of public lands, out west, the average return is about $14. In Montana, it's somewhere around $8. So we put $1 in, we get $8 back. When the feds put $1 in, they get 75 cents back. When I do that math, it's a whole lot better to have the state manage lands than the feds. Now, the feds are not, their charter is not to make money, it's just to take care of lands. But if we look at the fire in Roaring Lion, it was slated to have some fuel reduction done in it, but the feds moved slowly. The state probably would have had that taken care of long before that fire erupted, and had it erupted, we wouldn't have seen the carnage that took place.
Okay, Nick, what do you think?
So I believe that we can manage federal public lands for resource extraction better than we have, and I think we do need to take a collaborative approach with the federal government to make that happen. And the feds have made strides in the past few years in terms of engaging, and particularly counties have the ability to organize and collaborate with federal agencies on their land. The problem with the transfer of federal lands to state control is, Brad referenced the Roaring Lion fire. That burned on primarily Lolo National Forest. And yes, there was a forest project, a thinning project that was slated that didn't get done. There, by all accounts that I've been able to see, it would not have prevented the land. It certainly could have prevented or reduced the severity of it, but it would have burned. The fact of the matter is that forest burned. If that land is state land, which is what the movement to transfer federal public land wants, then we would be on the hook for those firefighting costs. And those costs could bankrupt the state. One bad fire season, and that would result in those lands going on the auction block. The state does have land. It's called school trust land. It's about 6% of Montana, but those are not the lands we go out hunting and fishing on. Those are lands that by law have to generate revenue, and they do, but they're leased and they're sold, and that is not land that we understand as public land.
Okay, let's get to the phone. Ellie, thank you for holding. You're on Talkback with our candidates. Go ahead.
Hey, Peter and John. It's Representative Ellie Hill. You know I listen. Hey, so I had two questions, but I know I probably only get one.
That's all right. We can do two.
So if I had two, since it's going to be my fourth session in the legislature, and I've only had the pleasure of serving one session with Representative Tschida, I would ask him about his vote to drug test poor people. And if for folks know, there was a bill last session that proposed to drug test folks that receive food stamps, which in Montana is called TANF, temporary aid to need of Fanny, which the majority in Montana are children that receive it. The Republicans and Democrats, of course, killed the bill on the House floor.
Just a reminder, so all listeners, including Ellie, a question that both candidates can answer. You can ask the question of Brad, but you need to form it in a way that both candidates can answer.
Yes. So right. So the question would be then, if it came up again next session, even though it was killed, we have the voting record of Representative Tschida, but then I would love to know how Mr. Davis would vote. And then my second question, so that I can allow them to formulate their thoughts. My second question is actually on what I thought was the most important bill of the session, and that was the jobs bill, the bonding bill. And if for folks that don't know what the bonding bill is, it is a bill that the legislature passes every year. In fact, we've never adjourned without passing a bonding bill. Last session, it was a Senate Bill 416. It was actually sponsored by a Republican. It was 416. Senate Bill 416 is $100 million in grants and loans for infrastructure. So that's our roads, our bridges, our schools. Most folks on both sides of the aisle think it's sort of what government's supposed to do, right? Create the infrastructure for the next generation of folks. And so it was supported not only by the Montana Chamber of Commerce, but the Montana Contractors Association, the Montana Realtors.
Real quick, Ellie, what's your question?
Okay, so I guess I was wondering, the majority of both bodies, Republicans and Democrats, supported the bill. However, to pass a bonding bill takes 2/3 of the party, and so actually it was the minority that killed the bill. And so I was wondering what Representative Tschida's opposition was, and how Nick Davis feels about using bonding to create infrastructure in our state.
Okay, we got it. So thanks for the call, Ellie. And so since she's singling you out, so Brad, you can start.
Representative Hill, thank you for the question. First of all, it was random drug testing. And if we're fair to those in the private sector, businesses do that all the time. So I see no moral inequality to asking people who are receiving your tax dollars, my tax dollars, the tax dollars of everyone in this room that's paying taxes, to prove that they are not a liability to the system. The second thing that it winds up doing is if somebody does have a drug problem and they're tested and found out, it gets them help. The bill, if you remember correctly, Representative Hill, would have allowed people to keep their benefits had they been found to be using. So it was not punitive. In some measures, it was a way in which to get these individuals help. And I'm all for identifying ways that we can assist individuals who have a substance problem to be taken to receive help.
Okay, in less than a minute. Go ahead, Nick, if you want to just comment on that one. Then we'll go to the next topic when we come back from our break.
So I believe state-mandated drug testing is an invasion on personal property rights, personal rights, civil rights, and I believe that I would classify myself as somewhat of a social libertarian. I believe that the government should not have any sway on your personal life unless you are doing something to harm others. Now, in terms of this policy, data has shown repeatedly that a very, very small percentage of people that receive government assistance are using drugs. And I think that it's a needless expense on top of being a violation of an individual's civil rights.
Okay, we're going to come right back and answer the other question when we about the bonding bill, and we'll be right back with that in 1 minute. All right, we are back on Talkback, and Representative Hill also asked about the bonding bill, which was defeated by a minority in the legislature. So since Brad went first last time, Nick, you're up. What do you think?
Yeah, so I have no issue with bonding in terms of in terms of a mechanism to get an infrastructure bill passed. We need infrastructure spending in this state. We have crumbling roads. It provides jobs. We have to address our infrastructure issue. In terms of the bonding, that is a financial matter. It makes sense to go that route with the interest rates the way they are, and I think it's absolutely the responsible fiscal path for the legislature to take.
Okay, Brad?
Speaking of being fiscally responsible, we would have spent $75 million in interest over 20 years and put that on the backs of our kids and grandkids. I don't find that fiscally responsible. And I think Representative Hill failed to note a couple of things. First of all, we passed or extended 6 bills that provided $160 million in infrastructure spending. There were 2 bills that got to the governor's desk that were specifically designed for eastern Montana, for roads, bridges, water systems, sewer systems. The governor vetoed those. And so people are saying, well, the Senate Bill 416 wasn't passed. If you look at the guts of Senate Bill 416, $150 million, Representative Hill, if I remember correctly, $50 million of which would have gone to refurbish Romney Hall, a gymnasium on the MSU campus, and build a new historical society building. So 1/3 of the money would have been designated. Eastern Montana could have fought for the crumbs, and we would have bonded that money for the gym and for the historical society building. And I think that it was ludicrous to do that. So to say that a minority defeated that, a minority of 1 on the east end of the second floor of the state building was the one who was responsible for 2 bills going down.
Okay, my question. Public schools. So recently we had the Smarter Balance test results in Missoula County, which outperformed the rest of the state on average. Only 50% were proficient in math. 57% were proficient in English or English language arts. And if you look closer, there's some schools that are much worse off. And if you look even closer, there's some teachers that produce much worse outcomes. Do you think that students across Montana and their families should have more choice in education?
Okay, we'll start with Brad. Go ahead.
I absolutely do, John. Part of the issue is that education is the only industry, and I'll call it an industry in Montana, that has no competition, no true competition. So when people say, well, you've got 3 schools in Missoula that people can choose from, serving the same menu item at 3 different restaurants doesn't give you choice. And that's what we're seeing here in Missoula. I think we need to have real viable choice options where someone who's interested in a STEM program can go to a school that specializes in that. If somebody's interested in medicine, they can go to that. If somebody's interested in getting a jump start on some sort of technical skill, they could get involved in that. And right now, we're not providing that for our youth here in the state. Also, I think that when you reference the percentage of people that lack proficiency, I believe, even though they're touting graduation rates being sky high, it's only because there's more students graduating. Right now, 41% of our students are not proficient in their language arts, and under 50% are proficient in math. And when I went to school, if you got a 41% or 50%, that didn't come quite close to passing. I think you had to get about 68 in order to be borderline to get borderline D. So we're doing a poor job. We need more choice in the state of Montana.
So Nick, it's your turn. What do you think?
Well, what I'm reading here is that the argument for more choice is really an argument for allowing public funds to go to private schools. And that is something that I am vehemently against. We are underfunding our public school system as it is. Funding for our public education system has gone down since 2008 while our population is going up. And as a result, we're putting an unfair burden on property tax owners who are asked to pass levies and self-tax themselves further. And it is unfair to kids in districts that are unable to pass a bond. Lolo is the heart of District 97, and those poor kids there can't get a bond passed to save their life. They are in a overcrowded, unsafe, and outdated school, and they cannot get that done. And frankly, our kids are our greatest resource, and I believe that the underfunding of our public education system borders on unconscionable.
Okay, we are 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give each of you a minute to wrap things up. So I guess, Nick, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I am running.
Why should we vote for you?
I am running because I am invested in this community and have been for many, many years. I am running in this district in particular because I believe my opponent, while I respect him as a man of conviction, I believe his convictions are not good for the people of this district. He voted against a resolution that would prevent the transfer of federal public lands to state control. He voted against allowing Habitat Montana, an arm of the FWP, to spend the $12.5 million that was its due through hunting and fishing licenses on wildlife biology and promoting access for sportsmen. He was one of 6 no votes against the school funding bill, again, in a district in Lolo where those kids are in an antiquated school. He also voted against campaign finance reform measures, and all of these issues that I've just laid out right here are issues that are very resonant with the people. I've been talking to people in this district since the spring, and every single one of those issues is very, very much on their minds.
Go ahead, Brad. You got a minute.
Well, thank you again for having me on here. There are a number of issues that I won't address in terms of the claims that were being made. We don't vote against issues of local bonds for schools, especially in Lolo. I actually voted to give the residents of Hellgate Elementary the right to vote on building a high school, even though I opposed it, because they asked me to grant them that. And even though I opposed it, I gave them that right. I really have appreciated serving the people in House District 97. Look forward to another session. And I just want to close by making a comment. Nick has been here for 25 years, and I believe Nick would consider himself a Montanan, and I would consider him to be a Montanan too. That same argument is being foisted against Greg Gianforte as a gubernatorial candidate, saying, he's only been here for 25 years, so he's not a true Montanan. Guess what? He is, every bit as much as all the rest of us who are here. So I appreciate the time on this show. Thanks very much for the listeners. If you have any questions, you can reach me either at Tschida4montana.com or at my cell phone, 406-546-4349.
And we are 5 seconds. Thanks for, guys, appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me.
See you tomorrow.